And with that, let's get started. About a month ago, RIT announced who would become RIT's 10th president. It was a momentous occasion, and we were thrilled to share that day with all of you on campus and through a live web stream. Today, we are very pleased to be able to spend more time with Dr. David C. Munson Jr., RIT's next president. Dave, so very good to have you today. Thank you so much for coming. And I'd like to get started by asking you to tell our audience a bit about your background.
Thanks, Lisa. It's great to have this opportunity to spend the next hour with RIT alumni and with friends of this great university. I started out with a pretty typical faculty career, I think. Actually, if I go back to my education at the University of Delaware and then received my PhD at Princeton, as I was completing my PhD, I didn't know whether I wanted to be a faculty member or to work in industry, and I interviewed in both places and literally almost flipped a coin and decided to try academia first and then just never left. I joined the University of Illinois and was a faculty member there for 24 years, did the standard sorts of things in teaching and research. But if I back up, starting with the earlier years, how did I even end up where I am today? As a child, I was just completely fascinated by science. I slept with Popular Science magazine under my bed, literally. I took everything apart in the house. I wanted to know how everything worked, and it was entering in the competitions and science fairs and that sort of thing. Was also fascinated by math, which came very easily to me. So this all makes me sound like a pretty traditional RIT student, I think. I also had a lot of music in my childhood. I sang in a number of different musical groups, church and otherwise, and then continued that when I was in college. Played some instruments, but not for a really long period of time. I did play the saxophone for a number of years in high school. Scouting was important to me. I certainly learned how to camp very well, but I became fascinated with the outdoors, partly through scouting and partly through really long vacations my family would take, traveling around the U.S. and Canada. I was able to see all the continental U.S., almost all the provinces in Canada, and most of the national parks. So I've always been fascinated with the outdoors. But then coming back to where I am today, I had been at the University of Michigan for quite a number of years, and most recently 10 years as Dean of Engineering, and was now looking for a new opportunity, and we can talk about that in a minute. So
that sounds great. You really have a varied background, but let's dig deeper into your time at University of Michigan. Many of us have watched in awe of the continued progress at the University of Michigan, in particular the College of Engineering, where, as you said, you spent 10 years as dean. That singular college with an impressive 10,000 students and 70,000 alumni is interestingly larger than half of the RIT colleges combined. So during your tenure, you grew faculty, you grew research, and from the messages we received from some University of Michigan students, you were highly supported by the students. So why don't you share with us some of your greatest accomplishments while there?
Well, it's usually a little hard for me to put any humility aside, but let me do that for a moment, I guess. At Michigan, one of my goals was to grow the engineering college, and so we grew it by a lot, and some of that is shown in the statistics up on the screen. But another objective I had, given the size of the place, was to try to create more of a community, and we were able to do that in a number of ways, a community among students, faculty, and staff, and to really attempt to broaden the definition of what it means to be an engineer. I was interested in educating people who I refer to as citizen engineers, people who are well-rounded, and people who were going to make contributions both within their careers and outside of their careers. And was pretty proud, I think, of the graduates that we saw across the stage. Prior to all that administrative work, as I mentioned earlier, I was just a regular faculty member, if you will, and I did a lot of research in the area of signal and image processing. When I finished with my PhD, that was back in 1979, digital signal processing using computers essentially, or microchips to process signals, was a brand new thing. And that was really a research area that was exploding. I was fortunate to be there at the time. Later, instead of just processing audio signals, communication signals, that sort of thing, the field grew to encompass images and video. And so I was really there for all of that, which was a great opportunity. My own research shifted away from some of the nuts and bolts of digital signal processing to imaging systems that collect data and then produce images. The system I've worked on the most over the years is called synthetic aperture radar, and that is a surveillance system. It's used both for scientific purposes as well as by various government agencies. These radars can be flown on aircraft or on spacecraft and can produce images of incredibly high resolution, even through fog, cloud cover, dust storms, and at night. I worked on and have worked on the computer algorithms that are used to produce the images from the raw data. So that's a snapshot of a lot of my former life.
I can see so many similarities to your background and RIT. You mentioned obviously your research, but also encouraging well-rounded students, and that's just such a hallmark of what RIT is. So thank you for pointing those out. You know, on the slide you also, we share a little bit about your family life, and I've had the pleasure of meeting your lovely wife, Nancy. Why don't you tell us a little bit more about her and the rest of your family?
Nancy's a people person, so if you're on the other end of the line here, you're going to enjoy meeting her. When I was a graduate student, she sort of put me through graduate school, if you will. She worked as a nurse in a hospital, in a facility for the elderly, and also in one of the first HMOs in the nation. And then after that, we had 4 sons together. As they grew a bit, she at one point did go back to work in an emergency room in a hospital, which was an exciting life for a while. But all throughout her adult life, she's been what I refer to as the world's greatest volunteer. Nancy has spent years and years volunteering in hospitals, homeless shelters, health clinics, and what have you, and she's looking for those same kinds of opportunities here in Rochester. Among our 4 sons, some of them are married, and we've now got also 4 grandchildren. 3 of the 4 sons and 3 of the 4 grandchildren live in Ann Arbor, but I'm very gratified that there is a short direct flight from Rochester to Ann Arbor, actually to Detroit, which is the airport we use, so we don't anticipate any challenges there.
Well, we look forward to having them come and visit one of these days once you get to move into Liberty Hill.
They're anxious to do so.
Well, that's great. So during the search process, our board chair, Christine Whitman, commented that she was thrilled that once again RIT had secured in Dave the right leader at the right time for RIT's upward trajectory. Dave's interest in engineering and the arts, in music and entrepreneurship, and strong research background make him a welcomed addition to our Tiger family. And up on your screen you can see some of the accolades that we have attached to Dave as a musician and mathematician and teacher and architect, landscape gardener, and rapper. Tell us more why rapper might be at the end of this list.
Well, I didn't put it there, but I think there is a reason that it appears. One thing I did as dean at Michigan was kind of reinvent our communications and marketing organization, and hired a very creative person to head that up, and we ended up hiring then additional people, videographers, musicians, IT people, all sorts of people that maybe hadn't traditionally been part of a communications organization. And this group had a way of provoking me to have a little bit of fun and doing some interesting things. So they came to me at one point and asked me to do a bit of a rap for a holiday video. This was a few years ago. And I told them, well, I could do something a little bit like that, but it couldn't be a real rap because I was a dean of engineering, and it really had to kind of fit that image. But we compromised and produced a little YouTube video that ended up getting a lot of hits. But then just this a year ago, this last Christmas, in the fall leading up to that, they came to me with an idea of essentially capping off my deanship with a bit of a rap that would tell the story of Michigan engineering and do it in a fun way. They also noted that at the time there was a new Star Wars movie set to come out in December, and so together we made a Star Wars rap. Again, this is not what I would call an authentic rap, but it did do a wonderful job in telling the story of some things we'd accomplished together, and that turned out to be a fun YouTube video. You can just go to YouTube and type in Michigan Engineering Star Wars rap, and there it will be, and an awful lot of people have looked at that and commented. Probably the most fun outcome was that the other deans of engineering across the country felt threatened by that because their staffs were all coming to them and saying, what are you going to do? And they said, well, not that. And so it remains to be seen what the other deans are going to do. They haven't fought back in this sector quite yet.
Well, we know that RIT students have been watching that video quite avidly over the past couple of months, and I think they're looking for what's to come next.
Boy, that's a good question. What I've told the communications staff at RIT is that I probably won't be the instigator of these sorts of things, but I'm willing to think outside the box and do what's necessary to help build the image. So I'm looking forward to that.
That's a great way to segue into what comes next at RIT. So I do want to change direction from your past to making this decision to come to campus. And for our audience, this would be a good time for you to consider those questions that you'd like to ask Dave, because we'll get to those in just a few minutes. So you've been talking with RIT now for a couple of months, learning more about us. Can you tell us a little bit about why RIT is the next step for you in your career?
Yeah, that's a great question, Lisa. As I was finishing up my deanship at Michigan, I was wondering whether there would be any other institution in the U.S. that might offer kind of the next opportunity for me, basically to make a contribution. And I didn't know whether I would find such a place or not, but when I interviewed in Rochester with a search committee, this was back in November, as I recall, I took a little bit of extra time. The interview itself went very well. I wasn't surprised by that because my background seemed to be a good match for the institution. But I took a little bit of extra time and drove around Rochester a bit, and also spent time on campus. And there'll be a few pictures of that trip coming up in just a second. Now, there they are. But at any rate, I saw the campus and said, wow, what an incredible place. Now, it turned out I was walking around on campus on a snowy Sunday afternoon. There weren't too many people around, and even with the, I would call it poor weather, but I know it's typical weather for Rochester, at least at that time of year. I was just very impressed by what I saw. I had known about the strengths of the arts at Rochester Institute of Technology in addition to the strengths in related to technology, so that had fascinated me. And then I came to know about the National Technical Institute for the Deaf. And wow, what a jewel in the crown. I was fascinated by the existence of that organization, and later learned about a lot of their accomplishments, the accomplishments of their graduates. And I actually think that's just such a wonderful program here at the university. And to walk around campus and see so many students using sign language, I think just adds to the element of visual arts that already exist in other programs on this campus. So those were some of the things that drew my attention. For quite a number of years, I've been seeing very impressive publicity coming out of RIT. Every university tries to do that, so you don't really know whether the publicity reflects reality down on the ground or not. But as I toured around campus and then later have come to know a lot of the people here, the publicity at RIT matches reality, and I'm thrilled with that.
Yeah, that's great. Well, we didn't want to bring you in only on sunny, bright days and only to challenge you later, but I'm thrilled that you were able to see the beauty of campus even through some of the snowflakes. You mentioned the breadth and diversity of the campus, and you also have some history in combining arts and engineering. I wonder if you could tell us a little bit more about your thoughts around those kinds of topics.
Yes, I have quite a few thoughts, and I don't want to cut into the Q&A portion too much, but I see many parallels between science and engineering and the arts. Part of it surrounds the central topic of creativity and originating new things and designing new things and changing the world. But there are a number of other parallels between the disciplines. So I've always seen the arts and technology as being something that ought to be blended together. At the University of Michigan, I did quite a lot of work in that space. I and the deans of music, theater, and dance, art and design, and architecture and urban planning created an organization on our campus called Arts Engine. And we used that to develop joint programming and coursework between our 4 schools and colleges. That then led to a national movement that we also originated called the Alliance for the Arts in Research Universities, A2RU. That has member universities from all across the nation now. It's only maybe about 5 or so years old. And the goal of that organization is to better infuse the arts throughout research universities so that they're not just standalone conservatories, but they're integral parts of their home university. So I've done a lot of work in that space and actually look forward now to having RIT join in some of this national work, and it might promote and prompt us to do some new things here on our campus at RIT.
Yeah, that's great. And I think you'll find that there's a growing desire for more interdisciplinary activities across all parts of campus. And so that'll be a welcomed addition to our thinking.
Well, that sounds great.
Would you have a question about how you feel about hockey? As RIT is becoming a hockey powerhouse.
I think hockey is a fantastic sport. So as you may know, I'm presently also not at just a football school. They're also a hockey school. Their team makes it to the Frozen Four not infrequently. I happen to be very impressed with RIT's ability to field a highly competitive Division I hockey team, given that the school doesn't offer athletic scholarships. So I'm going to have to see how that works. I have seen the arena. It's beautiful, and I look forward to spending time with alums and students and the whole RIT community at hockey games.
Well, that's great. You know, we're actually hosting this weekend as we move into championship play.
Oh.
So if we can get you to stay, we've got Friday night and Saturday night home games.
Wow.
We have another question from an alum who has been deeply involved in the honors program and recognizes that there could be some additional support to honors if we were to raise more money. So we were wondering if you have learned anything yet about the honors program and could see ways that we could add support to that program.
I have not learned about the honors program at RIT yet. I do have some opinions about honors programs. I think that a modern-day education needs to offer students elements that go far beyond the standard curriculum and beyond standard coursework and homework and laboratories and what have you. And so I'm a big proponent of elements of education in the areas of international programs, design, multidisciplinary kinds of projects, entrepreneurship, student groups and societies, leadership development, and the list goes on and on. And so what I'm hoping to prompt at RIT is, and I know this already exists to some extent, is a rich suite of programs that are available to any student and where every student is encouraged to participate to the limit of the amount of time and sort of ability that they have. Now, in addition to that, I think it's perfectly fine to have something formally called an honors program, and I've got to find out what RIT has and where that might go.
Well, we have more to educate you on in the coming months, don't we?
A lot more.
A lot more. So Scott writes to us and asks, what is your position on alumni engagement beyond traditional fundraising efforts?
Well, I think alums have a big role to play in a number of ways. Alumni financial support is critical to the success of the institution. But beyond that, I think alums and their experience can benefit our students here on this campus in a number of ways. It may be advising a student group on a project. It may be mentoring a student in their later years here at RIT, and maybe their first couple of years as they begin a career out in industry. And I think just the overall level of kind of communication that our alums have about the institution back in their home communities, wherever you're living, and raising the profile of the institution is fantastic. What I hope is that this is a place that has really offered a lot to our alums, and that our alums do want to have engagement in a variety of ways.
And as you move into your first year, starting in July, do you envision yourself traveling around the country to meet with alumni?
I absolutely intend to make my way around the country and at some point overseas to meet with alumni, any place where we can put a large group together. And I've already seen some preliminary lists of where that may happen. And so I think a lot of you that are listening in on this will have an opportunity to meet me in this coming year. I look forward to that. That's
great. We have congratulations to you from one of our alums on your impressive career and the opportunity to bring your leadership to RIT. Given the remarkable progress of RIT under the leadership of Bill Dessler, he asks, what is your vision for RIT moving forward?
Well, let me say that Bill has done a fabulous job over the past 10 years, and I've come to know him pretty well already. You always hear the term big shoes to fill, and I think that's very apt here. My hope for RIT is that we can become even more distinctive and then perhaps put even more of a focus on creativity and innovation, even though that's well underway, and to make this the place where if you're a prospective student and you're inclined toward technology, but also love the arts and don't want to give up music or don't want to give up dance, don't want to give up musical theater, whatever it may be, that you really don't have any choice. You have to come to RIT because this is the place that will blend all that together in the very best way. And so I have some ideas in how we may strengthen RIT in that regard, but there's no question anything I do will be built on a very strong foundation laid by Bill Dessler, all of you currently at RIT, and those who have preceded us.
That's great. You know, Dave, when you were here in January, when we made the announcement of your plans to come as our next president, I noticed that at the reception that you immediately made your way to a group of students. So please share with us some of your thoughts on engaging with students here at RIT.
Well, I'm in love with students, and even in my deanship when I was so busy with academics and fundraising and creating collaborations across the campus, I had a completely open door policy for students. I love to see how a person can grow and mature during the 4 or 5 years they spend on campus, and in some cases we get to witness how that maybe changes the future course of their entire family. Maybe they were the first to go to college. Maybe they were the first to be able to have the kind of job they're going to have and then be in a position to contribute to society, even way beyond, as I mentioned earlier, beyond what they do in their careers. So I'm fascinated by all of that. Maybe in some sense I never really grew up all the way because I'm very comfortable with students, and of course it helped having 4 sons. They are all through college now, but my youngest son is not that many years out of his undergrad experience, and so I'm pretty in touch with students.
Yeah, you seem to be, and who knows, there may be more videos in your future.
Well, yes, and maybe I can get some students to join in.
That would be great. We have another question from Mary Ellen, who mentions your significant growth in engineering program at Michigan, and asked if you paid particular attention to growing the number of women in this field, and what thoughts you might have about maintaining and increasing the number of women in engineering and computing at RIT.
Thanks for that question, Mary Ellen. Yes, I worked very hard on all matters of diversity, and that certainly included, in my case, women in engineering. So we worked really hard at recruitment of women, and that's not just a matter of showing up in the senior year in a handful of high schools. We were involved in schools beginning at the middle school level. We had events on campus where we would bus students in, and we had, of course, also special recruitment weekends, including for women students. We were able to increase the percentage of women in engineering by a fair amount during my deanship. I think the last 3 entering classes have been about 30% women. That's an improvement from before. It's still not quite where we'd like to be. When I look at RIT, I think that we need to keep working very hard at recruiting women into the technical disciplines that are offered by RIT, but I also think we need a little different balance campus-wide between the men and women students. Part of the answer will be more effective recruitment into the technical disciplines, but part of the answer, I think, is also going to be looking at maybe a slightly different mix of programs that would even help us attract more women.
Yeah, that's great. It's certainly an area we've made some progress in, but there's much more to be done, so we thank you for that. We have another question regarding our work in the healthcare area. Many organizations and individuals don't realize that RIT has programs in health-related fields, or even that we have an alliance with Rochester Regional Health. Have you given any thought to the future of RIT programs and research in health-related fields?
So that's an area that I really want to learn more about and to do that soon. At the University of Michigan, the largest collaborator for the College of Engineering by far was the School of Medicine. And we had just enormous joint activities between engineering and medicine, and I realized that here at RIT, the health sciences is a very good fit with the other disciplines that RIT offers. Of course, there's some really great programs already underway here at RIT, including up to and including the training of physician's assistants. And I've already had a conversation with the president of the University of Rochester about the possibility of increasing collaboration between RIT and the hospital and medical school at U of R. So I'm very inclined to build on what we already have at RIT. I don't know enough yet about the personnel that RIT has, and I don't have all of the details of some of the current programs, but that's an area we're going to be looking at very closely.
Mm-hmm. Great. Yeah, there's a lot of potential there as these programs continue to grow and as there's a greater need in our society. We have another question that revolves back around students in a different way. Jim also sends in his congratulations and welcome to both RIT and Rochester. But he also states that we seem to export our #1 product in Rochester, which is our students. Do you see a path to get students to remain here and start their businesses? And if so, what role do you see the Saunders College of Business playing in that endeavor?
Jim, I think that's a great question, and thanks for your comments and question. I've already been through this a bit in the last decade in southeastern Michigan, where the state, in my opinion, was too reliant on the automotive industry, and where we hit the depth of the recession, and with a couple of the automotives facing bankruptcy, I would say the state was in pretty dire shape. But during my deanship, we worked very hard on building our entrepreneurship programs and launching startup companies. And I'm not going to claim that we saved the entire state, but I think we have contributed in the state of Michigan in a very noticeable way to the diversification of the economy. And I know some of that work is also underway presently in Rochester by RIT. And so that's an area I'm going to be looking at. But I think the key to keeping students, and in fact, it's not a surprise to anybody, but the key to keeping students is having the right kind of job in the right kind of environment here locally. Some of that can be done through startups and helping create an environment where the startup-type personalities like to live, like to be. Another part of it, though, has to do with working with some of the larger companies that are already here and helping them do great things. So it's kind of an all-hands-on-deck approach, but I think RIT has to play a central role, and I look forward to engaging in that work.
Terrific. Thank you. We're going to go back to athletics for a moment, and Celeste, who is a student athlete, asks, what is your plan to continue to foster and grow the relationship between academics and athletics that our past president did?
Well, Celeste, thank you for the question. I happen to really, really enjoy athletics, and so the student athletes can expect to see me at a number of their games and contests, and I expect to learn a lot more about the athletic programs at RIT than I presently know. In terms of the relationship between academics and athletics, I know a lot about that at my current institution at the University of Michigan, even though people may assume that at a place like Michigan, there probably aren't any football players in engineering or any basketball players and what have you. Actually, we do have football players in the College of Engineering, and about a third of the men's swim team at one point was from the College of Engineering, and they won the NCAA, Division I national championship. So I'm used to associating with top-notch athletes who are also very serious students. And I'm looking forward to learning more about that culture here at RIT and making it possible for students to have that dual experience, because I know for so many students that's a really meaningful thing and kind of a lifelong, it creates some sort of lifelong fulfillment in terms of how you think about the institution, the experiences that you were able to have. So you can expect me to be supportive, but I can't say a whole lot more than that at the moment.
Well, we're very proud of our student athletes, but we do expect that we hold them to that student part as well as that athlete part.
And that's exactly what I'm used to. Yeah. I knew a lot of athletes at the University of Michigan in engineering, and the same academic expectations were there for them as for every student. And I can tell plenty of individual stories. I'll mention just one very briefly, but a couple of years ago, the student that won the award for being the top student in the College of Engineering at Michigan was also the captain of the men's swim team that won the national championship. And he had a grueling practice schedule, but he wouldn't have had it any other way. He then won one of the major fellowships to study in Britain, so he's in Great Britain right now working on a master's degree. But at any rate, these are the kind of people I'm used to associating with, and we'll have high expectations, and I'm sure that the students at RIT can meet them.
That's great. So you mentioned earlier the gem that we have at the National Technical Institute for the Deaf, and our really hundreds of deaf and hard of hearing students and faculty across campus. We have a question from Joe. Do you anticipate learning sign language?
Joe, yes, my wife and I do anticipate learning sign language. It looks a little bit daunting, I have to say. I've learned a few things already, but we're going to be working at that. It turns out that we have family members who are hard of hearing and have worn hearing aids since childhood. And I had a grandmother who was very hard of hearing. We do have one grandson who actually is learning some sign language now. And my goal is to stay ahead of him in learning sign language. We'll see how that works out.
Great. So let's talk about the Saunders College of Business. And Kathy sends a note and asks, how do you see the Saunders College of Business at RIT growing, not only as an adjunct facility to encourage the technology programs at RIT as profitable ventures, but as a nationally recognized program in business education in its own right?
Boy, that's a big question, Kathy. I'm one who happens to think that business colleges are really important, and I can tell you a little bit about sort of my evolution in thinking on that, because when I was a youngster, as I mentioned, really I was just attracted to science and math. I would say as a regular faculty member, I was still immersed in my research. It was mostly about science and math, and then I did a number of things in the arts, but I wasn't interacting with business schools. But at Michigan, the College of Engineering has a very strong partnership with the business school. And no surprise, I came to realize that if you want to make big transformations in society, a lot of times the most effective ways to do that are through business. And so I'm looking forward eagerly to learning more about the Saunders College of Business. I certainly have met the dean, but I'm not familiar yet with the detailed programs. Now, let me also make one other comment, and that is in the area of entrepreneurship. That's a space that really has to be shared and occupied by multiple colleges within RIT working together. In a typical campus, well, in fact, let me even back up and just give some statistics on any specific campus. In the case of the University of Michigan, if you look at where do the startups come from inside the university, where does the intellectual property, the patents, come from? About 40% comes from engineering, about 40% comes from the medical school, and then the other 20% is from the remainder of the university. And so if you look at where the startups are coming from, very often it's from the technology side or the medical side. Now, we partner very heavily at my current university with our School of Business. And we do that in the space of entrepreneurship and on some other programs as well. And so for me, it's going to be important at RIT to see that we have the strongest collaborations possible between the business school and the rest of the institution. And then by working together, I think we're going to make all the colleges better, including the business college.
Great. Thank you. Ray asks a question that I'm not sure that you have enough information on yet, but hopefully you know that we have a long-standing, outstanding School of Photography and a long-standing relationship with Kodak. That relationship obviously has been changing through the years. Do you have any insights into that?
I can make some comments there. Yeah, thanks very much for the question, Ray. I happen to be an amateur photographer and have some pretty good equipment. I know that I can't compete with the pros here at RIT, but I'm looking forward to seeing more of their work. And I know that RIT has one of the very top photography programs in the nation with many alums who have won Pulitzer Prizes, et cetera, so I'm extremely impressed. I'm also very, very familiar with Kodak. As a kid and a teenager, sometimes I thought I single-handedly kept them in business because I bought so much Kodachrome ASA 64 slide film and have just thousands and thousands of slides I've taken. And also, as a researcher, because I was working in signal and image processing, no surprise, I visited the Kodak research labs, and I actually know more of the inside story of kind of what happened with Kodak. The outside story is just that, oh, gee, Kodak didn't understand the world was going to become digital, et cetera, et cetera. Of course, that's completely wrong. Kodak had the earliest digital cameras. I saw them when I visited their research labs. What really happened was that Kodak lost their competitive advantage because they had the world's best film chemists, but they didn't necessarily have the world's best people in consumer electronics, which is the direction cameras ended up going. At any rate, I'm very interested in photography. Kodak is a much smaller corporation than it used to be, but I want for RIT to continue to have strong relationships with Kodak, yes, but also with any company working in the area of imaging. And, of course, there are a host of companies that do that.
That's great. Thank you for having such background with our local partners in Kodak. We have a couple questions that revolve around resources. So Stephen comments that several programs at RIT have capped or nearly capped enrollment due to limited resources, including faculty, teaching space, and housing. He says fundraising for major expansions is one thing, but how do you think we should address incremental growth?
Boy, that's a tough question, given the fact that I'm just still learning about RIT. Even though fundraising may be an uncomfortable topic for some, it's not an uncomfortable topic for me. And for RIT to do more, we're going to have a larger endowment, and we're going to have to keep creating successes in the fundraising space. Beyond that, what you end up doing is just rebalancing existing programs inside the institution, and I don't know enough about the institution yet to comment on any possible rebalancing efforts. My impression is that RIT has been growing at a sort of considered rate over the past many years. It's a larger university than it was. I'm hoping that we'll be able to continue that and continue to create more opportunities for those incoming students.
Yeah, that's great. The second question we have that also speaks to resources is regarding our research portfolio. And Shane asks, how do you see RIT growing its research portfolio? President Dessler spoke of reaching $100 million annually. Do you intend to continue that pursuit?
Thanks for the question. Yes, I do intend to continue that pursuit, and it's frankly partly at the urging of the Board of Trustees for RIT. The board wants to see that grow, and I think that RIT is now a large enough university that if it is not participating fully in the research culture within the nation and creating new information as well as providing an outstanding education, then I think RIT won't be all that it can be. Now, historically, RIT has been primarily an educational institution with a limited amount of research. That has changed over the last decade or maybe a little bit more than that. And the one thing I do want to point out is I think that the shift to doing more research and going after more funding, especially from the federal government, does not have to mean that educational programs will be reduced in quality at all, or that attention to undergraduates will decrease at all. I'm coming from a place that is outstanding in education and in research. I think it's possible to do both. But then that begs the question, but how do we get there? How does RIT get there? And one observation is that in years gone by, I think RIT hired its faculty primarily based on what would be their perceived success in the classroom and in working with students. And only more recently has RIT started looking maybe equally at research credentials. And so what's going to happen over a period of time is the nature of the faculty will change somewhat. We're going to be hiring people who, yes, will be fine educators, but also really want to do research. And that research is not just for the faculty members, it's not just for the graduate students, but this creates also great opportunities for the undergrads to be involved in creating new knowledge. And so we certainly will be pushing somewhat in that direction.
Yeah, great. So I'm going to broaden our questions here on two topics that are pretty big, and wondered your general thoughts on the university's role in social responsibility.
Mm-hmm. Wow, and yeah, in today's political climate, this might even be a tricky question. Let me just say that sort of writ large, taking the high-level point of view, there's no denying that across the hundreds of years of U.S. history, that universities have been elements of social change. And I don't think that RIT should just sit on the sidelines in that regard. On the other hand, this has to be a place that is diverse, that is welcome to all, and that doesn't mean just students of a more liberal mindset. It has to include students of all types, has to include military veterans, et cetera. And so what I hope is that we can continue to have a community that values others and that values hearing alternative points of view, and that together as a community we move forward with a bit of a social agenda. But I'm hoping that people don't feel left out. I'm hoping that people feel included.
Yeah. We talk around here a lot about celebrating our diversity and using that to bring people together for civil discourse and ensuring that everyone is respectful of one another's varying opinions and perspectives.
Yeah, that sounds right to me. And you know, I can go back in my own life and remember some pretty important moments that had to do with diversity. I'll just mention one, which was for a time I was very active in the IEEE, the Institute of Electrical and Electronics Engineers. And the society I was most active in is what's currently called the Signal Processing Society. It has something probably on the order of 20,000 members. And I was privileged, this is back in the probably early 90s, to be moving up in the leadership in that society and to be spending time with certain women who were leaders of the society, in some cases even the president of the society. And that was unusual at that time. And what I pretty quickly realized was that when we had meetings discussing strategic planning and all kinds of important topics, at those meetings we were hearing a broader set of points of view, and also we were making better decisions if those women were there at the table. And of course, I've seen the same thing in other contexts, in other dimensions of diversity. And so I see a huge value in having diversity, if for no other reason, to provide a better education at this institution and to better equip our students with what they're going to be facing when they leave this campus.
Mm-hmm. Terrific. So here's my other big, wide question for you. Given the U.S. political climate and RIT's growing international student population, do you think there'll be impacts on RIT going forward?
Well, that's something I would have a concern about. If we go back to 9/11, which of course was a horrendous act and a very difficult period for the nation, after 9/11, the U.S. did tighten up immigration policies. And I can tell you, as a faculty member, I found it more difficult to recruit the top international students from some of the same schools where we had established pipelines. We had a number of students overseas instead thinking, well, gee, I'll go to Australia, I'll go to Switzerland, I'll go somewhere else. And so it's very important for the quality of work we can do at RIT for the nation to still be welcoming of immigrants. I also certainly would have some concern, and will have some concern, about our own international community already on campus. We really can't be in a position where if a student travels back to their home country, they have difficulty re-entering. A few stories like that, and we'll have trouble attracting the best international students. And right now, the international students are a very important component of the student body at RIT, and not just in terms of their academic skills that they bring, but also in terms of the diversity. I'm one who believes that any undergrad should have friends who are from overseas. That's the real world. And RIT offers that opportunity right now, and it needs to continue to be offered.
Terrific. You know, RIT this past year was named now a National Research University, which we celebrate with our accomplishments in the research area. But for many of our alumni, there's a concern that that means we are moving away from our focus on quality teaching and education in the classroom.
Right.
Can you speak to that balance and ensuring that that rigors of quality classroom teaching is not going to end?
Yeah, so I touched on the subject just a little bit, but I can say more. And I hate to keep referring back to the institution where I currently sit, but that's where I have a lot of experience. My current faculty members, or my faculty members when I was dean, by and large were terrific teachers and educators. And of course, I saw every promotion case, and I would intend to use the same standards, the same tenure standards at RIT that I've used in the past, where we insist on quality teaching in addition to accomplishments in research. And the way I put it probably most succinctly is we can do more than one thing at once. We can be good at more than one thing at once, and that's going to be our aspiration. for sure, this will continue to be a student-centered university. That comes first.
Yeah, perfect. I think that'll help assuage some concerns of our alumni around the country. We have a question from Daniel. He mentions that co-ops are an important part of the RIT experience. Do you have any thoughts on how to strengthen and expand the opportunities for students?
Well, as I understand it, the co-op program is already really large and most students participate. I want to continue to support what already exists at RIT in that regard, because I think for many students, a co-op experience is important and really helps them determine the directions they wish to go after they leave campus. On the other hand, I'm also one who doesn't necessarily think that a co-op student ought to be required, or co-op experience ought to be required for every student. I'm used to dealing with large numbers of students who are going to be going to medical school, for example. And for that student, a co-op may be a great thing, but may not really be necessary given where they're headed. And I'm used to dealing with students who are going to law school. So for me, the most important aspect of thinking about co-ops and other experiences is that I think for every student, the education ought to involve more than just classroom learning. And that could take a number of different directions. One direction certainly is a co-op, and I would expect that large numbers of students at RIT are going to continue doing co-ops. But I also think that students may get very valuable experience serving on big competitive design teams. It could be the solar car team or the Formula race car team or whatever, or through international experiences, or devoting huge amounts of time to giving service in Center City, Rochester. And the list goes on and on. I think there are a lot of ways to have experiences outside the curriculum that are very valuable educationally. And I would like for RIT to think about that more broadly, and then we can decide just what we want to do. I know at the end of that conversation, co-op is still going to remain an incredibly important thing, and it should. But I also want students to be thinking about some additional opportunities as well.
Great, thank you. We have time for just about one or two more questions, and one of those revolves around NTID. So we talked a little bit about the National Technical Institute for the Deaf, and in particular in sign language, but we have a question asking more broadly what your thoughts are about NTID and perhaps its role within the campus.
Well, as the listeners may know, NTID has a long, long history at RIT. It is a federally funded program. It is funded actually at a very significant level by the federal government. And my first job is to help make sure that that money keeps coming in so we can offer these very fine programs. Another comment is that in more recent years, a larger fraction of students who are deaf or hard of hearing have actually been enrolled in the schools and colleges other than NTID on this campus. Now, many of them still receive services from NTID. I actually think that that's been a very healthy move. I think if the institution is doing all that it can for its deaf and hard of hearing population, that a larger fraction of students ought to find that they're able to work, say, within the College of Engineering or within the College of Business. And of course, we've seen that happening. So I think that's been very positive. I happen to love the elements of performing arts that I've seen at NTID. There are obviously some very unique things there that you would not find on any other campus. I've had a great time getting to know Jerry Buckley just a little bit and have already been diving into some of the details regarding NTID. But I'm going to be very supportive of continuing to build that organization. In my mind, it's just an absolute gem in the crown of RIT and certainly premier within the nation. We want to see that continue.
Terrific. One of the other hallmarks of RIT is our shared governance model. And as you're hopefully getting to learn about that, I know you're meeting with various governance groups on your visit this week, including student government this afternoon.
Right, that's correct.
So we have a question asking, what do you think is going to be the role of student government during your presidency?
That is difficult to answer without me understanding, I guess, maybe how student government currently functions. So I'm going to be meeting with that group this afternoon. So I wish this question came about 4 or 5 hours later. I can say that I expect to maintain the collaborative forms of governance and decision-making that historically have existed on this campus, and for everyone to feel like they have a voice and they're part of major changes in directions and big decisions on this campus. With student government in particular, I do know some of the student leaders because a couple of them were on the search committee, but I don't yet know what their agenda is and exactly what changes they wish to have on campus. I can tell you that I've already bounced a few ideas I have for the future of RIT off of some of the student leaders. So I've already been consulting them just a little bit, but that's not formalized yet, and we'll have to, it's yet to be determined how this is going to kind of work in practice. But students are going to be a big part of everything that happens here.
That's great. Thank you. So your visit today with us and the alumni really kicks off this week of visits throughout the campus, and then we know that will continue long into your presidency starting on July 1st.
That's correct.
So we look forward to welcoming you officially to campus this summer, and then taking you on the road to continue these conversations with your various constituents.
That sounds wonderful.
Well, Dave, I want to thank you for all of your time today. We appreciate your spending time with our alumni, parents, and friends. So that's all the time we have for questions at this point. Additional questions can be emailed to ritalum@rit.edu or tweeted at RIT-alumni with the hashtag #MeRITWebinars, and we will direct your questions to Dr. Munson. Note that all participants will receive an email from us in the next few days with a link to today's webinar. Many thanks again to Dr. Munson for joining us for today's webinar, and thanks to all of you for being with us. We've had a lively dialogue, and we look forward to connecting with you again on Dr. Munson's upcoming listening tour. Please consider joining us on Wednesday, March 15th, as alumnus Joe Boyd of Brighton Securities returns to present a webinar titled Developing Your Financial Plan, Getting Through Retirement, Not Just to Retirement. Thanks again to all of you for joining us. Please exit this webinar by simply closing your WebEx window, and please do let us know what thoughts you have on the webinar today through a brief survey, which will pop up when you exit. Have a great day.